Hello my friends, in this video we will be taking a look at the autosomal DNA results, predicted phenotype traits, and G25 results of a Bronze Age Iranian individual from Shah Tepe burial site in northeastern Iran. Right here it's a Bronze Age individual. It is a female, and she is from this region right here in Iran, from the northeast of Iran. So first, let's look at what she resembles with G25. The closest ethnicities to her are Mazandarani Iranians, followed by Makrani Iranians, followed by Bandari Iranians, followed by Balochi. So she's close to various southeastern Iranian groups. And she actually gets modeled as a mixture of Makrani Iranians plus Georgians from Racha, plus outlier Sindhis, plus Tsens, I think, are population of the Caucasus. Very interesting. So she's quite West Asian in her result. Let's try to reduce that to three populations and set distance column to 0.1. Actually, this set that to 1. See if that changes anything. And now we get a model that looks like a mixture of Makrani plus Georgian, but we see a very high distance, and I'm a little bit put off by the very high distance. I wonder what caused the really high distance. And I actually prepared another model for you guys where we try to model this individual with ancient sources. We try to model this individual with ancient sources. This person gets modeled as a mixture of 55. Actually, let me do something else. Hold on. Let me copy all of these here, and we're gonna put them into source in here, and we're gonna go ahead and, because this is way too small, I want you guys to see it better. Right, so this person gets modeled as a mixture of 56% Iran Ganjdare Neolithic, which is kind of like Iranian Neolithic farmer, so it's mostly Iranian Neolithic farmer admixture. Then 34.4% Kura Araks from Armenia, quite a lot of Kura Araks admixture, which is also kind of similar to Iranian Neolithic farmer. Not really, because it also has a lot of affinities to like Anatolian Neolithic farmers and Caucasian hunter gatherers, but it's also kind of similar. It's also sort of similar to Iranian Neolithic farmer. And then what's very interesting is the 8.6% Yamna. So let me close that. Somehow, this individual from Bronze Age Shah Tepe actually has 8.6% Yamna admixture. It looks like this person has some Yamna or European admixture as well. And then 1.2% Brazilian Lapo de Santo. So there's some Native American admixture as well. But what's very surprising is the Yamna admixture. So this person seems to have some Indo-European admixture as well as West Asian admixtures. Definitely quite surprising and definitely very interesting. So let's see what they score with my trade predictor. So keep that in mind. This person has some Indo-European admixture, not only West Asian stuff. Let's see what they score with ethnic calculator. And here they are closest to Kafkas medieval Anapa, that is with 600 SNPs, quite decent coverage, followed by Sarmatian from Urals, followed by Afghan medieval, followed by Israelite, Cimmerian, Hispanic, Sarazm Neolithic from Tajikistan. Decent model, actually, quite a decent result. And the closest mixtures is a mixture of South Asian plus Azerbaijan Neolithic, decent result. Turkish plus South Asian, decent result. Anatolian Alluvian plus Shahr Isukhta Bronze Age 2, once again decent result. There is also Assyrian plus Bactrian, once again quite decent model for a person from Iran. Iran is geographically somewhere between Assyria and Bactria, so even geographically this result makes sense. So like it's okay. It's a decent result. I'm okay with it. All right, let's close this and let's see what they score for Nashakot. What did this individual look like? It is a female, as you can see, 95.8% likelihood to be a female. So we don't get a haplogroup for this individual. So let's see the Nashakot calculator results and what they look like. And it looks like they have brown eye color. This woman has brown eye color at 71% likelihood. Definitely not blue eyes. Dark brown eyes are sort of possible at 17%. Hazel eyes are also sort of possible at 10%. Every other eye color is pretty much very, very, very improbable, very impossible even. So, but most likely it is brown eyes for her. For hair color likelihood distribution, most likely it is dark brown hair at 66%. Dark brown hair is actually, in my opinion, sort of light for somebody from this location, from northeastern Iran. They tend to have black hair. But the second largest group she scores is actually black hair. So she most likely has dark brown or black hair. She's scoring 66% for dark brown and 33% for black. And for every other hair color, she's scoring pretty much below 1%. So that's very insignificant. For skin color, it looks like she's scoring olive or Mediterranean skin at 88% and 11% for light brown skin, so she most likely has olive or Mediterranean skin tone. Also, definitely quite light for a person from Bronze Age Iran to score olive or Mediterranean skin. Uh, I think in terms of her appearance, she resembles more so Mediterranean Europeans rather than Iranians. And for hair texture, she has straight or wavy or curly hair, definitely not kinky hair, but most likely she has straight or wavy hair. And for nose shape, this is actually a very extreme result. Wow. It's one of the most extreme results for nose shape I've ever seen, actually, because she's scoring 99.4% likelihood for Greek nose shape. And I have never seen anybody score higher for the likelihood of Greek nose shape with my tool. So she's actually scoring probably the highest it is possible to score for the likelihood of Greek nose shape. That's very, very surprising. So yes, she's definitely got a very prominent protruding kind of a hooked convex nose shape. For coloring related variants found in the file, looks like she does not have blue haplotype 3 or 2. She has heterozygous genotype for BH1. Looks like she does have two light color variants in this version of SLC24A5 that has to do with light pigmentation of skin. Two light color variants and many of the variations of SLC45A2 that have to do with light pigmentation of hair, mostly hair, but also eyes and skin. Okay, and no light color variants in any of the relevant variations of MC1R, so no predisposition to being ginger. All right. There's some other variants here that contribute to ginger score quite a lot, but we don't consider those in this analysis, in this verbal analysis. All right, and now let's see the phenotype oracle. What phenotypes she resembles closest? The closest phenotypes to her is this, followed by this, which is this closest phenotype to her is actually kind of like a Mediterranean, I should say like an Eastern Mediterranean phenotype. I associated with Turkish people. The second closest phenotype is pointed. I associated with also with Turkish people. The third closest phenotype is, I guess, more of a Middle Eastern phenotype. I associated with more with Syrians or maybe Arabs, and she's getting more or less a mixture of this plus this. So the closest mixture is a mixture of 50% nat plus 50% nat. So she's definitely quite white for a person from Iran, and you can see that in the oracles. She's getting more or less a mixture of something that's more brown plus something that's more white. Like you see in the oracle, she's getting more or less a mixture of something that's more. And what's interesting is that all of these groups like these are all very brown. I mean, look at the skin tone, look at the features. Like these are all super brown, uh, and because of that, the secondary population has to be a lot wider. But then the last model where she's scoring 50% this plus 50% this, um, here the group is actually a lot wider, right? So and here and because it's wider, it's the secondary group for the secondary model is also a lot darker, right? So it doesn't have to pick out a second group that's very white to compensate because the primary group is also not very dark. But for example, in a case like this, where it's 50% this plus 50% this, obviously the secondary group has to be very light, has to be very white and European looking to compensate for the darkness and the swarfiness, the swarfiness of the primary group, which is really really dark. Look at its skin tone. It's really This is actually really Iranian looking. This looks really Iranian. This is, I would say, in terms of skin color, I would say this is medium brown, and this face on the bottom, in terms of skin color, I would say is just white, right? And this person scored olive for the skin tone. So if you combine these two together, you get olive. So that's why you see in the oracle it's 50% this plus 50% this. You get this individual's result. Whereas, for example, for this last model, 50% this plus 50% this makes sense because both of these faces have olive skin already. So that's why you get that's why the model makes sense. I'm not sure if I'm doing a good job explaining this stuff to you guys. Maybe I'm not. I'm trying my best. All right, let's see what she scores for the biomarkers panel. She scores above average level of vitamin D. She scores average level of LDL cholesterol, average level of HDL cholesterol. She's scoring above average level of glucose. She's scoring average level of hemoglobin. She's scoring very high blood pressure. Wow, so she has a predisposition to high blood pressure, which is really unfortunate. She has a predisposition to low level of iron in the blood, so definitely no hemochromatosis. She has a predisposition to below average level of sex hormone binding globulin in blood. She has a predisposition to low level of red blood cell count in blood. She has a predisposition to low number of base pairs and below average height. Very interesting. All right, now let's look at the polygenic risk scores. Okay, looks like she has a predisposition to above average odds of kidney stones, below average odds of hemoglobin E disease, uh, below average odds of migraine, average odds of lupus, below average odds of gout, slightly above average odds of thyroid cancer, average odds of eczema. Looks like average odds of exfoliation and pigmentary glaucoma, very high odds of open angle glaucoma. Let's look it up in the file. Actually, let's look it up in the file. Let's look that up. So she does have this genotype, which predisposes her to primary open angle glaucoma, and it's very rare condition. Um, okay, very interesting. We found that very interesting genotype in her file, and she has a below average predisposition to primary congenital glaucoma. Okay, for polycystic ovary syndrome, below average odds for that. For cataracts, slightly above average odds for that. For age-related macular degeneration, slightly above average odds for that. For rheumatoid arthritis, below average odds for that. For Tourette's, below average odds for Tourette's. For epilepsy, very below average odds for epilepsy. For asthma, average odds for asthma. For leukemia, slightly above average odds for leukemia. Slightly below average odds for vitiligo. Above average odds for myopia. Average odds for corneal astigmatism. Average odds for primary biliary cirrhosis. Slightly below average odds for stroke. Average odds for male pattern hair loss. Slightly below average odds for atrial fibrillation. Below average odds for deep vein thrombosis, which is definitely really cool. So we're seeing below average odds for deep vein thrombosis, but the S&P count is only 4. Below average odds for unipolar depression, so there is no predisposition to depression, and slightly above average odds for bipolar type 1, and above average odds for schizophrenia, and definitely very high predisposition to type 2 diabetes. This might be the highest thing she scored so far, actually. So yes, the highest predisposition so far that we've seen is to type 2 diabetes, and average score for type 1 diabetes, and average score for Alzheimer's, and very low score for multiple sclerosis. So the highest predisposition we've seen so far is to type 2 diabetes. All right, for breast cancer, 3 risk variants. They're here, here, and here. We don't recognize those. For testicular cancer, 13 risk variants, and in the keto G gene, there is only 1 risk variant in all the important variations, which is actually good because for Europeans it is typical to have 2, so she's actually quite good, a little bit protected from testicular cancer, because typical for Europeans to have 2. Celiac disease section, 1 risk variant for celiac disease out of 10, pretty good. GSS, no risk variants. Crohn's disease, 9 out of 28. We don't recognize any of these risk variants. Riefenstein's 1 out of 26, which is really concerning. You don't want to have any risk variants for Riefenstein's. Parkinson's at 1 out of 40, which is also really concerning. You don't want to have any any show up here. Um, this is probably a result of miscalls. This is probably because of miscalls in the file, corrupted file data, and not because of any genuine genotypes. But we don't know for sure. Gilbert syndrome, one common risk variant here. Basal cell carcinoma, no risk variants for basal cell carcinoma. Peutz-Jeghers, no risk variants for Peutz-Jeghers. No risk variants for hypopastasia, no risk variants for Jacob Creutzfeld's. No uncommon ones at least. No risk variants for Waardenburg syndrome. 8 risk variants for allergies out of 28 total, which is typical. No risk variants for FHC. 4 risk variants for irritable bowel syndrome out of 12 total, but they are all common. No risk variants for congenital insensitivity to pain. 2 common risk variants for Brugada syndrome, but they're common. And there is some risk variants for Treacher-Collins syndrome, but they're common. It's one common risk variant. Common risk variants for Piper syndrome, no uncommon ones. And there is one uncommon risk variant for aortic aneurysm, which is really weird. Once again, there's actually 2, but I can probably attribute that to miscalls in the file. Once again, there is 2 risk variants for myosclerosis. Once again, we can probably attribute that to miscalls in the file and low file quality rather than actual risk variants. Um, One risk variant for Lee Fraumeni. Once again, this is probably due to low file quality and miscalls rather than presence of actual risk variants. No risk variants for Fabry disease. Two common risk variants for Hirschsprung, and 2 risk variants for myelofibrosis. I think I mentioned this already. So quite typical stuff. I feel like we found a lot of miscalls in this file. There's a lot of miscalls in this file that in these rare variants that there really shouldn't be any risk variants. Well, maybe not, because this is sort of common. It's not that unusual to have risk variants here. I'm not sure why I didn't label this common. This is common. Maybe it's not that unusual. Let's look this up as well. Actually, let's look this up on DBSNP. I'm sorry, this may be boring for you guys watching me do this research. No, okay, no, this is definitely unusual. No, this is not common whatsoever. So them scoring this is like this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. So this is definitely a miscall. There is no chance that this is real. Absolutely no chance. All right. Anyway, so we found some miscalls in this file. Actually, we found some corrupted data, but otherwise it looks pretty good. Let's look at the monogenic traits now. Let's go through that. So it looks like this person has a predisposition to warrior phenotypes, which means slower dopamine reuptake and higher dopamine levels, lower stress resiliency. That's the highest thing they score. So if you take into account the genotypes in COMT, MAOA, and MAOB, they have a predisposition to essentially lower activity of the COMT, MAOA, and MAOB enzymes. Therefore, slower dopamine reuptake and higher dopamine levels. Higher dopamine levels means a little bit better at attention and motivation, but worse at stress resiliency. There's quite a lot of implications there. For D2, dopamine D2 receptor sites, looks like they have a predisposition to intermediate number of dopamine D2 receptor sites. So this takes into account the genotypes in DRD2, which are all of these genotypes. And for 5-HTT-LPR, it looks like they have a predisposition to intermediate number of 5-HTT of 5-HT in serotonin, intermediate levels of 5-HT. Which has some implications such as intermediate risk for depression, intermediate risk for anxiety, for a bunch of other conditions in this range. Definitely quite interesting. So what's interesting here is also they have a risk variant for Tourette syndrome, but it does not affect the risk score for Tourette's. They have a risk variant here for bipolar, high odds of bipolar. They have a genotype here in ADCY2, which is associated with bipolar disorder. Definitely quite interesting, and it also affects the risk score for bipolar as well. and they are not carrying any risk variance for dwarfism in FGFR3. Um, in SLC 6A4, one variant here actually is predictive of short form 5-HTTLPR, short or long form 5-HTTLPR. Is this variation right here. And some other variants in this gene are predictive of stuff like alcoholism, anxiety disorders, behavioral disorders. So if you look at that, looks like they have predisposition to less extreme alcoholism, increased risk of anxiety disorders, and high risk of behavioral disorder. I feel like that might be linked to the short form 5-HTTLPR. Don't quote me on that. It might be wrong. This statement might be wrong, but I feel like there might be some sort of linkage between these genotypes together. I'm not sure. Don't quote me once again. Um, okay, it looks like they have a genotype that leads to more fragmented sleep, where the risk allele is T. I'm assuming it's kind of uncommon. Um, okay. All right, for autism, looks like they have slightly higher odds of autism at 41% likelihood of that. For lactose persistence, looks like they do not carry any risk variance for lactose persistence. Definitely do not have any predispositions to lactose persistence. No variance for European lactose persistence at all. For OXTR and empathy gene, looks like they have a predisposition to lower levels of empathy. Definitely do not have predispositions to higher levels of empathy whatsoever. Definitely quite low in the empathy department. But actually, it only takes into account the variations in OXTR, and there's a bunch of other genes that contribute to empathy in general besides OXTR. So like, it doesn't take into account all the other genotypes. So it's very polygenic, and there's a bunch of other genes that contribute as well. Keep that in mind. For diabetes, we remember she was scoring very high for type 2, very typical average for type 1. Hemochromatosis, no risk variance for hemochromatosis. We remember that she was scoring low for the level of iron. Alzheimer's, no risk variance in APOE. Multiple sclerosis, no risk variance for multiple sclerosis in the HLA gene, which is really good. She's probably going to score very good for the HLA panel. And for cardiovascular disease panel, it looks like she's got predisposition to intermediate odds of cardiovascular issues, but she's actually scoring quite high for the higher odds of cardiovascular issues as well. 39.4% for that, compared to the 18.2% for the lower odds. So she's scoring more, 2 times more for the higher odds than she is for the lower odds. So there's definitely a predisposition to higher odds of cardiovascular issues, even though this is not the highest percentage she's scoring. Definitely a little bit of a predisposition to higher odds of cardiovascular issues as well. For myopia panel, I forget what she was scoring for myopia. Let's look it up again. Myopia. So she's scoring a little bit above average for myopia, and let's look that up again. Does not have the G allele here, which would protect from myopia. And for facial morphology, no East Asian genotype in EDAR, so she's got very European genotype in all the EDAR variations. She's got a genotype for slightly thinner eyebrows and another genotype for slightly thicker eyebrows. She's got a genotype for high odds of protruding nasal bridge, intermediate nose size, and nose drooping down based on DCHS2 genotype. Definitely nose drooping down. If we remember her scoring for the nose, keep in mind that she's actually the person that scored the highest for Greek nose shape that I've ever seen anybody score so far. Nobody, not a single sample I've analyzed so far, has scored 99.4% for Greek nose shape ever. So this is like I wasn't even sure that a score like this was possible before I've seen this sample. So and I engineered the application. So um, this is definitely surprising to me. Does not have micropenis. They're really good to see. Of course, it's a female, so of course she doesn't have micropenis, but doesn't have any predisposition to micropenis in the genetical sense, which is really good to see. One fat gene variant in FTOs, iris9949609, so she has some predisposition to obesity. One variant for increased pain sensitivity in SCN9A, which is kind of typical for South Asians. In South Asia in general, They have these variants for increased pain sensitivity in SCN9, and we're going to get to that in this panel a little bit later. Um, Not an Asian flusher, lower odds of alcoholism, and no more risk of esophageal cancer. She actually carries 2 risk variants for pain hypersensitivity out of 12 total, which is really interesting. You see, in South Asia, these risk variants for pain hypersensitivity in SCN9A are much more common than they are in the rest of the world. I'm not sure why that is, but I noticed a pattern when I was, essentially when I add these conditions to my trait predictor. I looked them up on DBSNP and I look at the ethnicity distribution. When I have to write, is it a common genotype? Like, I have to write some kind of information about them when I add them to the program. So of course I looked them up on DBSNP, and I noticed patterns, and I noticed that with SCN9A, I noticed the pattern that all these variants for increased pain sensitivity are much more common in South Asians. I'm not sure why that is, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Eastern Iran is like falls into this South Asian cluster. I guess it's pretty close to South Asia. I guess it's like it's within the vicinity of South Asia. It's pretty close, yeah. So she's got 2 risk variants for pain hypersensitivity out of 12 total, which is a lot. It's a lot of risk variants for that. It's very uncommon to have risk variants for pain hypersensitivity in these SCN9A genotypes. So she definitely has a predisposition to pain hypersensitivity. Definitely something to watch out for. For sex hormone panel, definitely very interesting to see. Let's analyze that. Um, Lower levels of sex hormone binding globulin, but we look at that already. Higher levels of testosterone, higher levels of bioavailable testosterone, but another genotype for lower levels of testosterone. Looks like she's got 2 genotypes for increased level of estradiol, but 1 genotype for lower levels of estradiol. And looks like she's got 2 genotypes for lower levels of DHT. Definitely very interesting. So 2 genotypes for higher level of estradiol and 1 genotype for lower level of estradiol. Since estradiol for her is the important hormone, she's the woman. She's a woman. Uh, looks like she's in the clear because she's got 2 genotypes for higher, 1 genotype for lower. I'm not sure what the exact contribution of. I don't remember already what is the exact contribution of these genotypes to the hormone profile of the individual is. For albinism in a typical traits panel, it looks like she does not carry any risk variants for albinism except for this one, actually. So she does carry a risk variant for cutaneous albinism type 2 in this variation right here. Let's look it up. There you go. So it's tyrosinase positive cutaneous albinism, and she is a carrier of cutaneous albinism type 2 mutation. I don't think she has albinism because you need to have, it's a recessive trait, so you need to have 2 risk variants for that, and she only has 1. But she is a carrier, so she actually is a carrier for the albinism mutation. Definitely really, really interesting. She also carries a mutation for increased risk of cleft lip. For familiar Mediterranean fever, no risk variants for familiar Mediterranean fever. This is really rare, by the way. Albinism is really uncommon, but also I'm not sure if it's genuine. I'm not sure if I can actually trust that because, like, we saw so many miscalls in this file. We saw so many calls that are like total bullcrap. So we don't really know if that's if that's something we can trust. Okay, for MTHFR panel, looks like they have a genotype that leads to possibly impaired folate metabolism, but another genotype which is good, pretty good stuff. 3 genotypes that are risk variants for breast cancer, but overall pretty good. And for testicular cancer, looks like 3 genotypes in keto gene that are all heterozygous, which is pretty good. And for rare diseases and traits panel, let's move on to rare diseases and actually let's go over the alcoholism panel first. Slightly below average odds for alcoholism, which is really good to see. They have a genotype that leads to 2 times increased risk of severe alcohol withdrawal. I think, what gene is that in? Let's look it up. This is in SLC6A3. I think we went over that actually. Yes, it also has to do with ADHD. Very interesting. Moving on to the rare diseases and traits panel, looks like they don't really have any risk variance for endometriosis. Let's see what risk variance do they have. They have a risk variance for panic disorder, which is really rare, and it's here. So they actually have a risk variance for panic disorder. Very interesting. Um, they have a risk allele for thoracic aortic aneurysm and dissection, which is really rare as well. Probably a miscall. All of these are probably miscalls, actually. I feel like most of these are miscalls. Um, they have an atypical genotype 1 holopronecephaly 3 risk variant in SSH. Once again, I feel like that's a miscall. They have a genotype that leads to up to 100 times increased odds of tuberculosis infection if exposed to tuberculosis bacterium. Very uncommon genotype. Once again, I feel like that is a miscall. 5.2 times increased risk of rheumatoid arthritis. Typical stuff. This is not a miscall. You see, this right here is most likely genuine because I'm seeing this a lot. And 4.6 times increased risk of ankylosing spondylitis. This is probably genuine as well. Um, let's see what else. I'm not seeing anything else. But holopronecephaly, this right here, and thoracic aortic aneurysm in this, and panic disorder, this, I feel like these are miscalls for sure. Like this is problems with the file. This is just inaccurate files. Okay. Um, for celiac disease panel, it looks like no risk variance in HLA, which is really good stuff. No risk variance in these variations either. One risk variant here. Okay, for androgen receptor gene, AG here, which leads to decreased risk of baldness, which is really very interesting. It is atypical for West Eurasians to have any protective variants here from baldness. They have a risk variant for Riefenstein syndrome in this variation as well, which is really surprising. Let's look up the allele distribution here. Oh, SNPDA doesn't show up. Oh, it does. It does. Hold on. It does. So yes, you see the allele distribution looks like this. So obviously, it's very uncommon to see a genotype like this. Once again, I feel like this is problem with the file. It's a very high quality file, but I feel like there is a lot of miscalls here. And for HIV and AIDS panel, no protective variants from HIV. For HLA gene panel, as I said, there looks like pretty low odds of autoimmune disease. This person doesn't really have that much predisposition to autoimmune disease. For MTRR gene panel, overall no risk variance for spina bifida and disorders of intracellular collagen metabolism. So overall, quite healthy. But they do have one risk allele for disorders of intracellular collagen metabolism right here in this variation. For homocystinuria, no risk variance for homocystinuria, which is really good. And it looks like they have a predisposition to intermediate homocysteine levels. Really interesting. For thyroid cancer, looks like if you just look at these genotypes, they'd probably score a little bit above average for the risk of thyroid cancer. Let's look up what they score for thyroid cancer and the polygenic risk scores because I already forgot. Yes, they score a little bit above average. That's exactly what they score. All right. And okay. For muscular dystrophy myopathies, no risk variance for that. No risk variance for ADL. Really good to see. Color blindness panel. No risk variance for color blindness in any of the three genes. This is really good coverage, actually. Look at that. Three genes. All three genes are covered. Really good coverage. Actually, two risk variance in OP and one SW, but I feel like that's not that big of a deal. Probably does not have color blindness. Actually, women generally don't have color blindness, so yes, she's probably quite safe from color blindness. FTO gene panel, no risk variance for obesity here. Heterozygous in these variations, and no risk variance for obesity here. So she's heterozygous for 4 variations and homozygous for not having any predisposition to obesity in 2. For these genes, lower BMI. For these 3 genes, for these two variations, lower BMI, and for this one variation, intermediate predisposition to lower BMI. For syncope panel, based on 7 SNPs, she's got a predisposition to intermediate odds of syncope, actually slightly above average odds of syncope, 1.15 times the average odds of syncope, so slightly above average odds of syncope. For biotraits panel, Looks like she's got increased levels of omega-3 fatty acids. Looks like she's got a one copy of hunter-gatherer CLTCL1 gene variant and one copy of the farmer variant. Intermediate ability to process carbs and sugars. Farmer allele is C. Looks like she's got, let's see, um, higher odds of motion sickness. Very interesting. Okay, for age-related macular degeneration, looks like she's got some genotypes for increased odds. I think she would score really high for that, actually. Based on what I see here on the screen, she'd probably score really high for age-related macular degeneration. Let's look at that on the polygenic risk scores. Age-related macular degeneration. Yes, she's scoring a little bit above, 1.6 times above average for that. All right. For cataracts, looks like she's got some genotypes that reduce, some genotypes that increase the odds. And for vitamins and levels, likely lower levels of vitamin D, some genotypes that increase the odds of the levels of vitamin D, some genotypes that lead to intermediate levels of vitamin D, lower red blood cell count, very interesting. Some genotypes that increase blood pressure, definitely quite interesting. For blood group panel, this is the last thing we're going to look at. So for blood group, she's actually got blood type A. This is very decisive, very definite prediction. And there's a lot of SNPs that went into this prediction. You can tell by the quality of the prediction. It's 99.5%. It's very high quality prediction. When you have a lot of SNPs that go into the calculation, you get a very high quality score, like this, for example. So we can say with a high degree of certainty that this person has blood type A, like definitely blood type A. In her case, so she's got blood type A. There's no doubt about it. And this is pretty much my video about this individual from Shah Tepe, Bronze Age Iran. Definitely quite interesting that she's from the Bronze Age, from 31 centuries before the Common Era, and somehow she's scoring 8.6% Yamna. It's really interesting that she's scoring so much Yamna. Maybe my model just isn't really good. I'm not sure why she's scoring so much Yamna. Maybe the model just isn't very good. But maybe you can explain to me in the comments how come she's scoring so much Yamna, how come she's got so much Indo-European admixture, and you can make sense of that. But anyway, thanks for watching until the very end. Leave a like and subscribe. And of course, make sure you buy my tool, my trait predictor tool that I use to generate these reports, these health and traits, and all of these traits and health reports that I generate for the sample, you can generate for yourself using my trait predictor. Let me show you what it looks like. Trait predictor, Andre DNA. This is my official website where you can find various sample reports with my tool, but you can also go to my itch page, and on my itch page you can buy my trait predictor on my itch page. You can see it costs $25 right now, and after you buy it you get access to my Linux and Windows versions for the itch page. I've been told, some people have told me that they can't run it on Windows because of antivirus. Antivirus prevents them to run it. In which case, of course, you can disable the antivirus for a short period of time. You can tell your antivirus, just calm down for a little bit for an hour, or disable it for an hour while you're running the application. But also, what you can do is you can run it in PowerShell, or you can run it in WSL. You can run the Linux version in WSL. So there's two ways to actually two ways to counter this problem, right? So it's totally not a problem. Totally not a problem. If you can run, there are so many ways to run my tool on Windows. So you shouldn't have a problem running it. And even on Mac, I think even on Mac, you can get on a VM and run the Linux version on a VM, because I've done it. I've actually done practice runs when I installed a VM, and I ran the Linux version of my tool on a VM. So I know it's possible because I've done it personally. Um, you can look at some of the sample reports on the site. There's a site, so you look at, for example, you can look at my report. You can look at Cheddarman. You can look at my report is right here, so you can look at my biomarkers reports. You can look at everything associated with. I don't really care about stuff like privacy too much. I just published my report, everything associated with it. Um, Maybe was it a good move? Was it a good move to publish everything online? Probably not. I don't know, but I care more about sales than I do about privacy of my own DNA. Sounds really bad to say that right now, but it is what it is. Anyway, make sure you check out my tool. Make sure you check out my tools on itch, and also, if you can't afford, if you don't have the $25 for my tool for the executable, and for example, if you are on Mac and you don't know how to install a VM, or you just don't have the $25, or you don't really know how to run the executable, that's okay. You can actually just send me your raw DNA file, and I will run it for you, and that will only cost you $4. So you can actually follow the link that's in the description of the video. There will be a link um, to a upload file, upload Google Sheets upload, Google Forms upload link, where you can upload your file. You can pay me on PayPal $4, and I will analyze your file for you. I will send you your report. So that's only going to cost you $4. If you want to upload 2 files, that's going to cost you $7. Really cheap. Nobody online will provide you this service for this kind of price. So like really, really, really cheap. Once again, costs you nothing. Costs you absolutely nothing. Make sure you check that out. Um, and also in the description of the video, once again, at the end of the video, gotta say that in the description of the video will also be a link to where you can download the raw DNA file that I've been analyzing in this video, Shah Tepe, sha003. This file will be in the description as well. You can download that in 23andMe format, do whatever, upload it to GZ Match, whatever, do whatever you want with it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.